Hello, everybody. I do apologise for being 5 minutes late. It's 8:10 on a Thursday. Maybe you've been out clapping for carers today. And yeah, I haven't, but we just had a little bit of a mix-up with time differences because our guest this evening, Jackie, is dialing in from Barcelona, and they're an hour ahead, so we had a bit of a head scratcher around the times, but it's okay. We're here now. Jackie is here in the green room, so welcome. And Joe, if you're joining us, Karen has been added to the group, so she is able to tune in. So just a couple of minutes of little announcements and sales gubbins before we bring Jackie in. So if you feel like you have some friends who could benefit from the Hive, then please do invite them in. You can just invite them directly if you think they would enjoy what's going on here or get something out of it. And also feel free just to share the group link with all your networks on Facebook or LinkedIn or your friends or whoever. That would be good, so we can support more people, reach more people, and grow the Hive, get some more bees in the Hive. Next thing is, there's a couple of mental health first aid courses coming up. We can do them online now. Yay! So there's a half-dayer on Monday, the 1st of June. That's next Monday, isn't it? That's Monday coming. It's not very many days away. So Monday afternoon, come along to that. Just go to my website if you'd like to join. It's pathlight.org.uk/courses. Send me a message if you've got any queries or can't find the link or anything like that. And there's a full 2-dayer, the full mental health first aider qualification. You can do that the week after on the Monday and Tuesday, the 8th and 9th of June. And that's a really good course, I promise you. And if you are struggling in any way at the moment or just need a bit of support, you can call me and I'll give you a free 15 minutes consultation, see if we can work together in the longer term. Or if you just want to get something off your chest or a bit of support, then feel free to book in either on my Facebook page, which is Pathlight Limited, or just send me a message on Messenger or info@pathlight.org.uk. And finally, before we get Jackie in to talk about narcissists and narcissism, if you are finding some benefit from the Hive, if you are enjoying the content and you would like to support us to keep it going, then your support will be very much appreciated. Thank you very much. You can do this in 2 ways. You can either buy me a virtual coffee for £3 or any denomination thereof, 3 lots of 3 or 5 lots of 3, whatever you want. Anytime you come to a session, you think you got something out of it, you can send me a coffee. That would be really lovely. Thank you very much. Or you can subscribe. You can become a member and get lots of benefits like exclusive content and discounts off my mental health first aid courses, priority booking for the coaching calls, and something else as well that I've forgotten. But you can do that at the same website, which is buymeacoffee.com/thrivehive. Thanks to all the people who have bought me coffees and subscribed already. It's much appreciated. And I'm not doing this just for financial reward, I'll have you know, but it's nice when people do support, and it makes it sustainable in hopefully the longer term. So tonight we are talking about what it is like to live with a narcissist, and we're going to bring Jackie Bennis in very shortly. She's a psychotherapist and she has lived experience of living with a narcissist. And I just want to do a bit of a trigger warning that you may find some of this material a bit triggering, hence the trigger warning. You might recognize some of this in one of your previous relationships, maybe even your existing relationship, or maybe a close friend of yours. You might feel that their partner is a narcissist or has narcissistic tendencies. And that may ring some alarm bells and think, oh my goodness, they need to get out of that relationship. I need to get out of this relationship. So if at any time it gets too triggering, too uncomfortable for you, feel free to turn it off or watch from behind a cushion, whatever you need to do. So without further ado, let's bring Jackie in. Hello, Jackie.
Hi, Paul. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me.
You are very welcome.
You just want me to, first of all, to say a bit about myself, and then you're going to ask me some questions, I think, Paul.
That's how we'll roll. Yes, that'll be great. Thank you,
so just very briefly, I'll say this first, because I think it's pertinent to what we're going to be talking about tonight. In 1993, my dear aunt died, and she left me the greatest gift. She left me just over £30,000. And at the time, I was living in a 7-bedroom mansion in a very nice area of London, and I didn't have a penny in my bank account. I was given housekeeping money every week, which served only to buy the food that we needed to feed our family. So in 1995, that money, or some of that money, enabled me to enroll in a psychotherapy training. And I have to say, it changed my life. 5 years of training, and I was never the same again, thankfully, after that training. And in 1997, that same money enabled me to hire one of London's best divorce lawyers and start divorce proceedings. And my lawyer at the time, his nickname was the Rottweiler, and he did a very good job, I have to say. So anyway, Paul, you have some questions for me.
Yes, thank you for that introduction. And my heart was warmed as you spoke about your training, because as you know, I'm at the same college that you went to at the same time as my dad.
That's right. He was in my year, your dad, all the way through, 5 years.
Yeah, so a lovely connection and a lovely sense of warmth I get from hearing you speak about how it changed your life, as it is continuing to change mine. So thank you for that. Yes, so there's 2 questions, Jackie, that I ask all of the guests that come on to Pathlight Thrive Hive. Number 1 is, how are you coping with this new way of being? Well, I don't know what lockdown looks like in Barcelona, but how is it for you?
It's been really tough in Barcelona because we had a very severe and strict lockdown. So 10 weeks of being in on my own. I live alone, so 10 weeks of eating on my own, which, I'm used to being on my own, but 10 weeks is a bit tough because we were not even allowed until 2 weeks ago to even go for a walk. We were only allowed to go to a supermarket, a local supermarket. But now, since this week, we're allowed to see relatives and friends. And I had the most delicious lunch on Tuesday with my son and his girlfriend. And I can't tell you what bliss it was just to go out and sit at a terrace. The restaurants haven't opened, but terraces have. So just to be able to sit and feel a bit normal again. So but it's been hard. It's been really hard.
Yes, I can imagine that. We're social creatures, aren't we? And we need that face-to-face contact. I mean, Zoom and stuff like this are great, but it
helps,
the same, is
but
it?
it's not the same. No, no.
And tough when you're on your own as well, I can imagine. So, next question. What do you love, Jackie? What are your passions?
Well, I love cooking. I'm not a bad cook. And I love the theatre. I love ballet, opera. I love jazz. I love reading and writing. And I have lots of hobbies, which in a way, the hobbies kept me sane during the lockdown, because without them, I think I would have found it much tougher.
Yeah, it's great to have those interests that we're passionate about, hobbies or whatever it is. That nourishes in some ways, isn't it? Aye, okay. So you are, as I understand it, you're still a practicing psychotherapist over in Barcelona.
Sort of semi-retired, but I still have clients who I see on Skype. Basically, nice. That's the way I work now, on Skype. But okay. Yes, I have a few clients. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So why do you do that? Why are you a psychotherapist? Why did you choose to train in it? What do you love about it?
Well, I love the training, and for years before the training, I'd been thinking about it, but without the money, there is no way I would have ever been able to do it. But I just love the interaction that I have with the clients, and especially when you have long-term clients, you really get to know them, you really get to understand them, and they become a part of you. You know, you have it's a different rapport to a client who you see just for a short period of time. Long-term clients, there's a real relationship builds up, and it's really rewarding. And it's rewarding to see people change. I mean, this is the most rewarding thing, is to watch the change. You know, the light suddenly goes on and somebody gets it, you know, starts to understand and starts putting those changes into practice, which is wonderful. But of course, change in any shape or form can have a disastrous effect on the family, on relationships, because if the other person isn't changing as well, then usually a conflict situation will arise, apart from in those cases where, you know, there are people who have really supportive and understanding partners. And even though they're not in therapy themselves, they are solid enough within themselves to be able to watch the growth of their partner and understand what's going on. And those are the gem partners to have. But not all partners are like that. They start to feel threatened when they see somebody changing, somebody becoming more assertive, putting boundaries down. And that's a tough one for a lot of people.
Change is hard. And I imagine it's the same when you're training to become a psychotherapist. I've heard a lot of the tutors at our college saying that many people who go through the psychotherapy training process end up separating from their partner because they've grown and changed so much. It's very hard to maintain that relationship.
It's only if the other person is rock solid and has a strong sense of self that they, you know, they can be part of the journey, if you like, without feeling threatened or uncomfortable.
Yes, thanks for that. So I invite you now, Jackie, to share as much as you wish to, as much as you're comfortable to, around your personal experience, your professional journey, any mental health journeys you want to share that have got you from where you were to where you are today.
Well, you know, I had very low self-worth. I was brought up in a family of women. My family history, women seem to dispose of the men in one way or another as time went by. So I had a couple of uncles that I was very close to, but other than that, only one of my mother's sisters was still living with her husband. The rest had all divorced, or the husbands had died, or, you know, there was no man on the scene, if you like. So I was brought up by a lot of women, and I was a fragile little thing, and I was always ill as a child, and they were very worried, you know, for my safety. I was a bit smothered, but not in a nice way. But because they felt they loved me, they did what they could. So, you know, I grew into a girl that was extremely shy and unsure of who she was. So you can imagine the process that started when I started to do therapy, because I continued to be that person until I actually went into therapy and into the training. So I think I'd like to explain. You have to excuse me for looking at my notes, but if I don't look at them from time to time, I'll be all over the shop. I'm not used to this kind of thing. So I just like to explain. I mean, I guess most people understand a little bit about narcissistic personality disorder, but I'd just like to say a few things. I looked in the diagnostic manual of narcissistic personality disorder, and just so that everybody understands fully, I just like to read a few things, you know, from the précis of what's written in the manual. So, describing somebody with this disorder, they say they lack empathy, unwilling to recognize or identify with the feelings and needs of others. This person is interpersonally exploitative, i.e., takes advantage of others to achieve his or her own needs, has a sense of entitlement and unreasonable expectations of especially favorable treatment, and has a grandiose sense of self-importance, feels superior and needs admiration, and has a lack of empathy. So in my experience, my own experience, narcissistic people can be extremely charming, very seductive, very persuasive, even funny and witty. But of course, the shadow tells a different story. The shadow reveals a very manipulative, controlling, cruel, and punitive nature. I'm not an expert in this subject, but over the years, I've had many clients who have been married to people or their partner has had narcissistic tendencies. So I've lived it firsthand, if you like, through those clients. I've witnessed their struggle firsthand. Most people, and I'm sure everybody knows this, that most people just need to feel safe and need to get their needs met. We all have a backstory, and our early life experiences really molds us into who we become later on in life as we grow up. And there's usually a good reason why somebody behaves the way they do because of that. So I'll share a bit of my story, but I'm not coming from a judgmental or critical position. I'm just stating things as I've experienced them. Mm-hmm. I got married in 1976, and I found it extremely difficult. I found life rather difficult because at the time I didn't know anything about narcissistic personality disorder, and I just thought my husband at the time had terrible mood swings. I found it very confusing to be sometimes given a gift and then at other times completely stonewalled or ignored, totally ignored. And very often I was shamed in front of other people. For instance, if we had guests, I would find myself being shamed, being admonished for something I'd done or something I hadn't done correctly, which I found really shaming and embarrassing. I have two wonderful sons. One lives in Barcelona, and last year we celebrated his birthday, and I don't see my ex-husband very often, but he did come to Barcelona to be part of the birthday. And I remember looking at him, and I saw this 70-year-old man who looked totally lost, completely lost, and like a lost little boy. I mean, that's what I saw when I looked at him. And I felt lots of compassion for him because he hasn't changed, of course. He is exactly the same and doing the same things that he's already done. And he's suffering that he's always done. And he's really suffering. So I felt great compassion when I saw, because he's been ill and he didn't look well apart from anything else. And I just felt terribly sorry because his life hasn't moved on. He's remained the same. He's incapable of changing. He criticizes everybody and just lives his life the way, that he's always lived it. So,
can I jump in with a question there, Jackie, if that's not going to break your stream of thought? So a couple of questions, actually. So first of all, it's more of an observation that it's wonderful that you were able to feel that compassion for your ex-husband, because I can only imagine what you went through with being married to him for was it 21 years, you said?
Yes.
So I imagine you were deeply wounded by that, and yet you saw the wounded child in your ex-husband and you were able to have that compassion for him. So I'm guessing you've come to some kind of forgiveness.
Yes, I mean, it took me a long time, because I would play the old scenarios around in my head and just play all the hurt and everything. And that took me a long time to get rid of that. But I think last year was the first time that I've actually been able to look at him without being mad at him, without feeling angry. And he didn't look well. I mean, he 2 years ago, he almost died. He had a heart problem and he almost died. So he's been really ill. But I just saw the helplessness, and I couldn't feel angry looking at that, because it's impossible to feel angry when you see somebody and they're struggling while they're trying to put on this big show of being okay, but underneath it sort of hurts you to see that, that somebody is suffering in such a way. And that's what I saw when I looked at him.
Yes. And they say, and I think it's very true, they say that hurt people hurt people.
Yes.
So
yes.
Clearly he had been injured at some point, probably in his childhood. And
oh, yes, definitely.
That's what led to him becoming the narcissist.
Yeah.
We've had a question, a comment come in. I'm not sure who it's from, but it says they can hide their lack of empathy very well. What's your response to that, Jackie?
Well, as I say, they can can be extremely charming, and charming to the outside world. I mean, it's quite startling to look at the contrast when you see this person, how this person behaves towards people on the outside, people who are friends, associates, business partners, whatever. How charming and how wonderful they appear, and then as soon as they get away from, they come within. Once they leave the outside stuff and they come within, and they're back at home in their own space, the change it's like Jekyll and Hyde. I mean, it can be unbelievable, but they do hide it really well. Because they want to be admired. So if you want to be admired, you're not going to put your worst face on, because nobody's going to admire you, are they? So this is the way it works. This is how it works.
Lovely, thank you for that. So sorry for kind of breaking your flow there, folks. If you have got any other comments or questions, whether it's your own experiences that you want to share, or if you've got a question for Jackie, then just pop them in the comments, folks. So back to your story. Jackie.
Just before anybody asks any more questions, I wanted to tell you how I saw it, and this didn't dawn on me until not that long ago. How I see it from my perspective. Because I believe on an unconscious level, my ex-husband and I, we chose one another. We chose to be together. Even though we both had issues around self-worth, my ex required excessive admiration, as his own self-esteem was very, very low and was very fragile. And I, on the other hand, cringed at any kind of overly admiring remarks or observations. I used to just make me want to cringe and hide away, which is what I usually did. And this was perfect for him because it left him to shine in the limelight, so I lived very much in his shadow most of my marriage. So as far as he was concerned, this was a brilliant match, because he was always there in the front, receiving all the compliments and whatever was going on. And it must have felt as though he really did feel he had the upper hand. I'll just add something here, which is quite which is quite amusing. And then I'll shut up and wait for any questions. In 1996, I reported to my therapist, because I was now into the second year of my training, and I reported to my therapist, Alan Pimentel. Paul, you know Alan.
I know Alan, yes.
That I discovered that my husband was involved in his third big affair in our marriage. I just discovered he was involved with a woman. And before I could say anything else, Alan said to me, hang on a minute, let me guess. The woman in question comes from a humble background, and she looks up to your husband like he's a god. Is that right? And I said, got it in one. So
the wisdom of years from Mr. Pimentel there.
Yes, yes.
Lovely. Thank you for that. Yes. So we've had a comment from Hayley. And Hayley says, you are, well, this is interesting because you just said that you weren't great at receiving compliments, Jackie. So here's a compliment. Yes. I imagine you're better at it now. But you are an amazing lady, such compassion, which I identify with because I try to see the goodness in everyone too, and often get told to stop doing by others. Oh, to stop doing so by others. Yeah. So yes. There you are.
Thank you, Hayley.
Compassion.
Yes, of course, we have to have boundaries around wanting to see the best, because we can be well and truly taken advantage of if we need to protect ourselves at all times, basically, and one can be very easily used or manipulated, especially somebody with a kind heart who is always very happy to help people and do their best for people. We need to think of ourselves as well, as far as how we protect ourselves. But it's a wonderful quality to have, to be always, non-judgmental and ready to help anyone and be an ear for anyone who needs to talk. That's a wonderful thing to do.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you. And another comment, I'm not sure who this is from, but it says, you have just described my ex perfectly, including the affairs. I've never heard of this personality type and blamed myself for years. I've not reached the point of compassion yet, but I would like to try to. I too go over and over in my head scenarios that I've lived through with him. Do you have any tips on how I can stop these thoughts?
It's a tough one. I think we've got to find a way to love ourselves, and to find that compassionate place for ourself first. Because it's really important. Human beings beat themselves up over all, not just big things, but really small things. And this particular type of person, a narcissistic person, this is their bread and butter, to make the other person believe that it's their fault. They're in the wrong. They've done something wrong. Anyone who has an open heart, this is like a dagger in your heart when you're constantly being told, well, this isn't my fault, this is all your stuff, you're messed up, it's your stuff. And you can understand how people get hooked into relationships where they're being treated in the most dreadful way by their partner, and they can't see it themselves. They keep making excuses. Well, it was a bad day, or a bad year, or a bad this, or a bad that. And they keep making excuses. And it's very often the friends of those people that can see very clearly what's going on. And sometimes the message gets through, but it's usually, if it doesn't get through, it usually means that the other person really doubts themselves very strongly. So they're only too happy to sort of forgive the other person and blame themselves. And running the scenario over in your head is not healthy. And it's easy enough to say that, but when you're right in the middle of it, to try and stop it is really hard. But I would suggest that finding ways where you can meditate and where you can start to do some inner work on yourself, because there is a child within you that is hurting and hasn't healed. And until you can heal that child, you will not be able to heal the adult within yourself. I'm sorry, I can't. It sounds almost flippant to put it that way, but we have to first learn to love ourselves and to believe in ourselves, because once you've got a strong belief in yourself, then you can see so much clearer, and you stop the self-blame game. And I like to think of it like this. So you're beating yourself up over something and you're putting all the blame on yourself, or you're going through all the hurt and all the stuff that really was very hurtful and very wounding. And, just imagine you have your best friend, or your sister, if you have a sister, and just imagine if she was going through this stuff. What advice would you give to her as a loving, caring sister or friend? What would you be telling her? And if you can sort of look at it from a different perspective, that might help you begin to heal, because, wounds are wounds and they don't heal in 2 minutes. It takes time. And sometimes it takes a long time. And sometimes people go from one wounding person and they hop right to the next wounding person. So it gets, all the stuff gets reinforced once again. It is a trauma. Being hurt and wounded is a trauma, and we need to heal that trauma in ourselves. And it's very important to do that for our own, for our own well-being.
Yeah. Brilliant. Yeah. So I think, to kind of summarize what you said there, Jackie, it's all about healing the trauma, healing that inner child before you can heal the adults, being compassionate to yourself like you would to your best friend or your sister, what advice you'd give to them if they were in that situation. Take yourself out of the equation and all those messages of I am a bad person, and nurture yourself as you would your closest friend. Yeah, and it sounds like there's self-esteem is the key thing here, I think, on both parties, for the protagonist and the victim. It yes. Seems like people who have narcissistic personality disorder want to project this image of having grand self-esteem, hence the grandiosity and look at me, I'm so charming and wonderful. But underneath that is actually a severe lack of self-esteem, and they feel pretty bad about themselves. And then they project that onto the other person, who they beat down and criticize and blame for everything until their self-esteem is broken down. Is that an accurate representation?
They have to feel superior. They have to feel better. So the only way they can get to feel better is by persecuting or finding fault in someone else. But it's there's been, obviously, I know my husband's backstory, and I know how difficult his childhood was, because his father divorced his mother when he was 4, and his father was very affluent, and the mother was left almost penniless. And he had a sister and an older sister and an older brother, and they used to, go backwards and forwards between the two houses. So they were going from a really impoverished household to a super luxe household, backwards and forwards like yo-yos, and very little, a mother who was very quiet and very sensitive and very afraid to speak out, to a father who was a narcissist, of course, who was, the life and soul of a party, but who spent very little time with his children. So they didn't grow up with any decent skills to work with, and they were very confused. So, I can understand exactly what happened to my ex-husband living in those kind of circumstances. They're looking down on people who had nothing, which is where his mother was, although he didn't look down on his mother, but he despised anyone who wasn't of a proper status, who didn't have some kind of big inheritance or was rich or whatever, despised other people. And, the rest is history. No wonder he grew up. He was a totally confused boy and felt very deprived. And there was a lot of toxic shame there, ashamed of how poor his mother was and how much she had to struggle. And then at the other side, this father who was throwing money around and giving lavish parties. And, when you look at the backstory, you understand exactly. So that's trauma. That's a childhood trauma. And then, we carry those traumas, as I said, into later life. But it's kind of because of the conditioning and the familiarity of that behavior that you kind of attract situations that reinforce it, that reenact it. And that's where we, I think everyone who has suffered any kind of trauma, and I'm not saying every child on the planet has a horrible childhood, they don't, but those that have suffered and have had trauma, abandonment or early life abandonment, early life non-attachment with mother, all this kind of thing, it has an appalling effect on somebody when they grow up. And that's what needs to be healed, because until you heal that, you won't be able to, or you will find it, life will be difficult and relationships will be difficult.
Yeah. And those patterns tend to repeat, don't they?
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
And we keep getting presented with those opportunities
Absolutely.
to address them and attracting
Absolutely.
the same type of partners.
Absolutely.
And so it goes until we unwind it all. Okay, so yes, whoever it was that asked that question says, thank you so much. You have really helped me. I feel as though I've taken the first step this evening. So that's great to hear. I wish you well on your continuing journey. And shall I go ahead with some more questions? Or do
yes.
You
No.
Okay, so being severely gaslighted is horrific. I wouldn't wish it on anyone. I've learned a lot from it, and I'm now capable of recognizing narcissistic traits in a person and avoiding them like the plague. Out of the fog and into the light. You've got to believe in yourself.
That's it. Yeah. Firm boundaries. And really, you have to be really assertive. When I started, because I did like you, Paul, I did the foundation year first, and the first thing we learned was assertiveness and boundaries. And I knew a bit what boundaries were, but not that I put any in place, but I had a vague idea what they were. I didn't know anything about assertiveness. And this was in 1995. And I used to do all my ex-husband's correspondence. So I was like his secretary. And he used to have this is the thing about somebody who cannot put themselves in somebody else's position. Their needs have to be met immediately. And even if they just think of them 5 minutes before you're about to walk out the door, that you have to drop everything and, comply. And so halfway through the first year, I mean, I really, my eyes were opening to this, what it is to be assertive and what it is to say no. And how you mustn't get caught in a trap, because people with an agenda, they have a wonderful way of talking you round. Somebody rings you up and says, oh, I need you to go to the airport and pick up whatever this person, and I can't get anybody else, and you've got to help me, otherwise I'm going to be in a mess, whatever. And it is pointless at that point trying to talk to that person and say, well, I'm really sorry, you know, I'm going to be, I have all these things to do, and I'm going to be really tightly stretched if I do that. Can't you get, and can't you do, and you try and find solutions for the person. Well, that's their bread and butter. Once you've done that, you've had it, you've lost it, because they will find a way to make you feel bad about yourself, or to, you know, talk it round so that eventually you give up and you do what you're being asked. And the only way to answer that kind of request is no. Sorry, no, it's not possible. I'd really like to do it, but I just can't. So the answer is no. So you can imagine me. I mean, so many times this happened. I was rushing to the door just to get ready to get out the door to go to my lecture. And I would be met by my ex-husband waving a piece of paper. Oh, can you just send off this fax? It'll only take you 2 minutes. And I'm already late. So you can imagine the rage I was met with when I started to be assertive and say, no, I can't. I'm late already. I have to go now. Sorry. Another time it was worse. It was in front of his next door neighbor. So he felt really ashamed. Can you just give us a lift up the road? It'll only take you 5 minutes. And it was in the wrong direction. And I said, sorry, I can't. I just can't do it. And he was livid. So somebody who is very controlling or narcissistic, the one thing they can't stand is not getting their needs met. So he didn't speak to me for about 3 months after that. But, you know, this is the only way. You have to have rock solid boundaries. And it's not about being unkind. It's not about being cruel. It's not about being mean. It's just about how do you best take care of yourself and don't get into the trap. I have lived hundreds of conversations where somebody's talked me round to do something, and I've agreed finally to do it, and I've gone to do it, and it's hit me in the gut. I've had this awful feeling in my gut because I know I've let myself down, and I feel bad because I didn't want to do it, not because of any meanness, but because it was just, it wasn't convenient. And I can't tell you the times that I've gone through that, where I've had that awful feeling and really didn't want to do it and felt annoyed with myself and, you know, felt as though I've let myself down. But again, mainly the reasons why I did agree in those days was because I was afraid the other person wouldn't like me. I was afraid they would stop speaking to me. I was afraid they'd become rude or irritated with me. And that was my big stumbling block, what they would think. And that's codependent behavior. And that has to go out the window, because you will never be free if your thinking goes in that direction. And, you know, coming out of your comfort zone, it's really tough. It's really scary. I mean, my heart used to be in my mouth sometimes. I was terrified of my husband. My heart would be in my mouth to say, no, I'm not doing that, or to refuse something. But once you've done it, once you've stretched, the next time it's a bit easier. And the time after that, it's easier still. It's hard. It's really hard. But this is old programming that we, you know, that I had to get rid of. And it was tough. It was really tough.
Yeah. So feeling the fear and doing it anyway.
Yeah.
And,
yeah.
you know, there's always going to be fear of repercussions.
Yeah.
Narcissists, I think, normally have a really short temper and can get very angry.
They can be very punitive.
Yeah.
Very, very punitive. Withholding, so financially withholding money, withholding.
Yeah, all control tricks, isn't it, to maintain that superiority. Yeah. So, yeah, we've got a comment. Thank you so much for sharing and raising awareness on this. My experience is virtually identical. My ex-husband's mother also has NPD and couldn't attach to him.
Mm. Mm.
Mm. So I want to ask Jackie, for someone who has narcissistic personality disorder, I'm guessing they don't generally take themselves off to therapy.
I've never had one, but I've never wanted to have one, because these are the hardest people to work with, because they can't admit, they find it get them in a good mood, and they might do lip service and admit yes, they might have certain flaws, but you're just scratching the surface. So why would they go into therapy? They're okay. It's everybody else that's not okay.
Exactly. Yeah. So is there any hope? If somebody is with someone, maybe there's people here who are watching today who they recognize their partner as being narcissistic, but they still love them very much. Is there any hope that that person might at some stage change or go to therapy in order to change?
I remember Alan told me that I should tell my husband to go to therapy. And so I said, okay, but I said, who on earth? He's frightening. Who on earth can I send him to? And he said, oh, I know exactly the person, Susie Saunders. She lives in a nice big house. He'll be impressed with the big house she lives in. And she's tough. He'd be fine with her. So, but you see, we had really poor communication, my ex and me. So mainly because I was terrified of him most of the time. So I did suggest it. And you know what he said? Oh, that sounds like a really good idea. Yes, I've just got to go and get my ear sorted out. But when I've done that, I'll think about it. Of course, he never will. But as long as a couple are strong enough, they both love each other, they're strong enough, they're companions, they have a relationship, a solid relationship. And as long as they have that and they have good communication skills, then it's possible that they both would be able to hear the other one, and they would be able to hear, how the other person feels hurt, and maybe the other person is doing something that they're not aware of, and so therefore they can communicate in this way. If they can do that, then they do have a hope. As long as they have a clear line of communication and understanding, I would suspect it's, for a lot of people, it's mainly those situations where there's a conflict arises, that perhaps the relationship, steams along quite well until there's a conflict situation, and that's when it becomes difficult. But if the relationship is solid, what I would recommend in this situation is that that the couple go for couples counseling. I would not recommend that only one partner goes for counseling. Again, we've got a situation like one person doing a psychotherapy training and the husband staying, or the wife being at home. It's not a good idea if one partner goes to therapy and the other one doesn't. All kinds of resentments can get set up unless the partner not going to therapy is very grounded in understanding. Both partners need to go to therapy, and that possibly would work, because in that therapy room they would both be invited to share where they're coming from, and it would at least give them the tools of how to communicate in a better way, to understand one another, to hear one another. And that would be my recommendation. If somebody thought that they were struggling and that they needed to have a better communication around these issues, go into couples therapy together.
And having that psychotherapist there as a independent third party can really...
Well, they're the mediator, and if they're good at what they're doing, they will straight away see what's going on in the dynamic, and they will understand how to get both parties to start to dialogue, to start to hear one another, to start to negotiate, even simple things like negotiating who puts the rubbish out, who organizes a trip, who so there's a shared activity, and there's an agreement between both parties on something that's done. I mean, how many people go off and do something on their own? They come home and they tell their partner, and the partner's not happy because they haven't been consulted. They feel they've been left out, So it's all about communication. If you can do that, then you have a hope that you can get somewhere.
Yeah. And the other factor, I imagine, is that both parties have to want to change. So they have to acknowledge that there's an issue there, and there's no point in going to therapy if you don't want to change. It's not going to happen, is it?
I've seen a lot of couples. We used to, with my colleagues, we used to call the men, very often it's the men who don't want to be there. They pay lip service, they go, and they feel like they've been dragged along. And we used to call them the draggies because they were dragged along and they sat there. That's not going to work. Sometimes it's the women, but very often it's the men who do. They're just trying to please their partner. They don't really want to, be there. They don't really want to interact in anything. They don't want to really hear anything. And it usually breaks down. It usually doesn't work. Both parties, you're absolutely right, have to be 100% committed. One of the first questions they'll probably get asked by the mediator, by the therapist, is, so on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the highest, how much do you want this marriage to work? And they're supposed to be totally honest in that. But you can imagine what happens if the wife says 8 and the husband says 4. That's brilliant, because you can work with that. That's you've already got something to work with, but very often that's the case.
Okay, so I think 2 or 3 more questions if you've got time. I'm aware it is.
I know, I'm okay.
I'm sure?
Okay. No, I'm
Thank
okay.
you, Jackie. Okay, so feel free not to answer this one if you don't want to. Somebody's asked, did Jackie go on to have another relationship after such an experience?
I will answer it, and I will answer it truthfully. I have issues with men. No, I did not. I went out of my way to avoid doing that. Not for the want of people trying, but I just didn't feel I wanted to go through all that again. And I could be working on this, and I probably should be working on this, but I do have issues. And those are issues around trust. And, I had a pretty nasty time. But not at the beginning, right at the very beginning, because I lived for 7 years in Saudi Arabia, you can imagine. And my ex-husband, built up his business there. And so he was very wealthy. And so during those times, apart from having an odd affair here and there, I mean, he was quite generous. But it was after we came back that he no longer had the same luxurious income as before that he tightened the belt. But trust, it's a hard one, trust. Mm-hmm. It's a really hard one. Mm-hmm. And sometimes, I ask myself, am I a coward? Have I been a coward for not daring to, to go out in the wide world and risk it? But the way I look at it, I'm really happy. I'm very, very happy. I love my life, and I'm happy about everything about it. And maybe I am being a coward. I don't want to rock the boat. I haven't got, I'm old now. I'll be 74. Can you imagine, in December? I haven't got the patience to start. Can you imagine dating again? To start and, oh God, no. Not for me. But that doesn't mean other people shouldn't follow my rule, because it's totally wrong. And I'm aware that that, I've taken an easy route out of it. But look, you've got to have courage, and you've got to go for it, but not for me.
Yeah, each to their own. So thank you for being honest there, Jackie. And yeah, I had a lecture at college yesterday with Kathy McDermott. Talking about couples counselling. And she said something which really resonated with me from my own personal experience and from wider life as well. Around, let me just get my words straight. So she said, yeah, so if there's two people in a relationship, the stage one, which is the romance, and everything's jolly.
Everything's rosy. Lovely.
Yes, we see the best side. We put our best face forward, as Kathy said. And then in the second stage, there's cracks start to appear. And all of the negative traits in our partner that we had been blind to in the romantic love.
All the stuff that got covered up a little bit, yes.
That comes out. And then at that stage, quite often we have a choice, or start to really just accept each other and see the divine in each other. Help each other grow and nurture each other's growth. Or we say, actually, this is the wrong person for me, we'll go our separate ways. And she said, whichever route you take, there isn't a right or a wrong route, but there's growth whichever way you go. And I'm guessing that applies to you as well.
Well, actually, that's where the growth is, when the cracks appear. There's no growth when everybody's making, they're putting nice sugar candy on everything and making it look wonderful. There's no growth there. The growth is when when the nasty cracks appear and you see the real side of each person sees the real side, and it's not quite so palatable. Well, it's quite a shock if you imagine it, after you've imagined this super person on this pedestal, and all of a sudden, no, you're seeing things that not very nice. But that is actually the point where you can grow. But most people give up at that point, and it's too uncomfortable, and they just, it's like when you get clients in front of you and you ask a little bit about their childhood, and they say, oh no, I do want to open that can of worms. So it's a bit like that, and it takes courage. It really takes courage, and who knows, maybe the relationship will not turn out the way. There's no such thing as a perfect relationship. I mean, it doesn't exist. It's constant work. A relationship is constant work. Even, I think Kathy did the same couples training as I did, Imago. And it's constant work. There's always something comes up. There's always we've always got that little child deep down there that feels hurt or aggrieved or lost or abandoned or whatever. And that stuff comes up, and it has to be worked on. And the people that have really achieved, gone to couples counseling, gone through the whole thing, and really achieved that place of okayness in, everybody has their ups and downs, everybody has their off days, but they know how to deal with it. They have done the work.
Thank you. Yeah, so folks, if you've got any last questions, fire them in now. My last question, I think, Jackie, is around the difference between narcissistic traits and narcissistic personality disorder, which I think you've given a really good account of today. I kind of believe that all of us have some kind of narcissistic traits within us, and it's a spectrum. It's a continuum. Would that be right?
It's a fine line, It's a very fine line. So, yes, I mean, you have to know somebody really well to look at this diagnostic manual and say, that's it. They've got all of that. They've got the whole lot. But people have bits. We all have our funny little ways, and we all get triggered by, what can trigger one person would leave another person looking absolutely stupefied. Well, why get upset about that? I mean, it's nothing, but it means something to the person. And And it all goes back to early trauma. There's still a residue there. There's always a residue there. And once you can identify that, then you have a dialogue with yourself. Well, what the hell is going on? What was that about? You can start to understand where it's coming from.
Yeah. Yeah. And, painful as it has been, I've recognized that in myself. I was talking to a friend today about how I was with my ex-wife. We were together for 16 years, and I felt like I was doing everything I could to make the marriage as good as it could be. But looking back now with the enhanced awareness and different level of honesty that I have around my own behavior, I can see that I had some narcissistic traits. I was controlling, I was critical, I was bullying, really. And I look back on that with no pride whatsoever, but I have compassion for myself, as you had for your ex-husband, in that I was doing the best I could with the tools I had at the time. And yeah, my best wasn't great, but that was all I could do. And
well, that's all you could manage, because you didn't know, you didn't have any more information, in your toolbox. So, I was also punitive. I used to get punitive and spiteful because I got hurt so many times. And there are times, and it was sod's law, when he was being nice, then I was being funny. That's how I'd get my own back sometimes. So, none of us go without some kind of, we've got an input. We've all got an input in the relationship at some point, and nobody's perfect. And we're all coming from our own wounds, of course, and, attacking when we feel attacked. And, you see it happening all the time with people. But, if read a lot, just read a lot about it, and you will learn. And not everybody wants to go and do a training. Not everybody can can afford to go and see a therapist or whatever, but read a lot. But having said that, I mean, there are lots of groups going on now that that you can join, that support groups and all kinds of groups. And so if anybody's really interested, you can find a way to find some like-minded people and it's good to talk. It's good to talk and hear other stories. And, you begin to, when somebody starts to tell you about their childhood, you really get it. You really understand how hard it's been, and people that can't show emotion because their parents didn't know how to show emotion. People who are afraid. You were saying something about people crying. Was it today?
This morning, yeah.
Yeah. The times I watch on the television, somebody being interviewed and they start to cry, and this is very English. Well, maybe American as well. But anyway, and they say, oh, sorry. They're apologizing for crying, as though, because they're embarrassed. And hell's bells, maybe 10 years ago, I would have done the same. I would have apologized for being, for crying or being upset. But it's the way we're educated in the West as well. I mean, this, not being able to show feelings, not being able to show vulnerability. And this awful thing about people feeling, well, it's weak to cry, or it's weak to admit that you're feeling down, or it's all a load of,
Yes, very politely avoided that word there. Thank you. Yes, it is a load of... Marvellous. Thank you, Jackie. So, okay. 3 more questions. Or 2 more questions, then a thank you, and then we will end. So, do you think it is common for people to avoid relationships after such an experience?
It depends on the experience. It depends. Look, if somebody's been with somebody for 5 years or something, I don't think that would put them off, trying to get into another relationship. Why should it? It depends on the person. It really depends on the person. But it's this big thing about trust again. How do you trust someone? How do you decide to give your time over to trust someone? And I know lots of people who have had a really rough, younger people who've had a really rough relationship, and they've gone on to get into a second relationship, and it's just brilliant. They've found the right person, and they're really, really happy. So, you know, it would be awful if everybody turned around and said, well, I'm not doing that again. That's not for me, kind of thing, because you don't know. There will be somebody out there, you know, and you know, when I have old friends who have been married a long time, and they're not a lot of them, but some of them are really, really happy. And when I see that, I think, oh, isn't that lovely? You know, they do stuff together, they do stuff apart, but they're in tune with one another. And it looks so brilliant. And I do feel a sense of, wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah. So, yeah, I always like to come from an angle of hope. There's always hope. But I think what you're saying, Jackie, is that people need to heal. They need to heal their wounds first, because if that trust is gone, it could well be too scary to try and embark on another relationship. So,
well, a lot of people, as you know, just jump into another relationship almost immediately. The last one has ended. And I think that's, whatever the situation of the relationship that's ended, I think that's bad news, because you're not giving yourself time to breathe. And people often make mistakes doing that because it's too quick. But, you know, there's no reason why somebody, you know, can't find a partner. I mean, it seems difficult these days for young people, though. I'm hearing that all the time, that it doesn't. In my day, you know, you found a boyfriend very easily, but these days people work a lot. Well, in normal times, people work a lot, and they don't seem to have the time. And you hear that, you know, I see friends of my sons that are on dating sites, and I'm thinking, why do they need to be on a dating site? Can't they meet anybody? But it seems it's not that easy for some people.
Okay, and final question. I'm wondering, during your marriage, did you work and add to the financial upkeep of the household or not?
I did work. I couldn't add to the financial upkeep of the household because, for the simple reason that I went into business with a friend of mine, and she chose the location, which was completely the wrong location. It was a fashion business, and we didn't do very well, so we didn't make any money. So had I made money, of course I would have. Well, I mean, even before we were married, when we lived abroad, I used to hand over my whole wage packet to my then boyfriend, which my father pulled me up about at one point, and I told him to mind his own business. But he was right, because I was giving everything, you know, everything over. But no, I couldn't, because of the situation with the shop, because it never made any money, unfortunately. But having said that, after I got the money from my aunt, very often I wouldn't get enough money for, if we had house guests or business dinners or lunches and stuff like that, I wouldn't get enough money to pay for all this, and I ended up paying a lot of stuff out of my own money. And I redid most of the garden out of my own money, because for once I had some money to spend. But so had I been working, I probably would have handed every bit over, or just about. Yes.
That's part and parcel of the control and superiority again. Wonderful. Okay, so Jackie, is there anything else that you'd like to bring that we haven't covered that you think might be important to share?
I don't know. I think I don't know. I think I've covered most stuff. I mean, as much as I can. It's what would have been perhaps good if I'd done a sort of case history. That might have been helpful, which I've only just thought of now. That would have been quite helpful. But I think I've covered it all anyway, Paul. But if you can think of anything else you want to ask me, or if anybody later thinks of something, because very often you think of things afterwards, don't you? So if anybody else thinks of anything, just, send Paul a message and I'll get it. But I think I've done as much as I can do in this space of time.
Yeah, I think you've done brilliantly. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, it's been a pleasure. So two thank yous. Please thank Jackie so much. A beautiful woman inside and out. A very insightful discussion this evening. It has been incredibly helpful. Lovely feedback.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And another thank you. Very intuitive indeed. Excellent.
Thank you.
So, yeah, I echo all of that. And it's been a real pleasure, Jackie, to chat with you and learn some more about NPD. And yeah, you'll be very welcome to come back another time to talk about inner child or do a case study or whatever you want to bring. That would be marvelous.
Yeah, so, I would be happy to do that. And I will bring a case study.
Thank you. Brilliant. Lovely. Well, thank you very much, Jackie, once again for your time. I realise it is 20 past 10 where you are now. So
that's okay. That's no problem. That's no problem. We go to bed late in Spain.
Yes, have that afternoon siesta. All good.
Yes. Thank you very much, Paul.
Thank you. I'll speak to you soon.
It's been a pleasure. Care. Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye.
Marvellous, eh? Isn't it great? Wonderful. So, yeah, I hope you found that useful. But judging by all the feedbacks, oh, blimey, there's another question. I'm going to bring Jackie back in. Jackie, are you still there? Yes, you are.
Yes, I am.
One more question.
Okay.
Is there any reading that you would recommend around this topic?
No. Well, there must be millions of books. Well, not millions, but there must be many books that have been written on narcissistic personality disorder. Can I come back to you on that? I'll have a look. Off the top of my head, I can't think of one, but I'll come back to Paul and he will relay my message. I will look into that because I would rather suggest a book that's been recommended than just any old book that I obviously haven't read. So in fact, there is a book I've read that, funnily enough, one of my first therapists, I think she was trying to give me a message, recommended me to read. And I'm going to look it up because I think that covers very much this disorder. It's mainly, I feel it's mainly directed at women, but I mean, it can equally apply for a man. So I will look it up. I'm going to make a note of that and I'll look it up and I'll let Paul know.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And someone's coming saying there's a great website called Out of the Fog. I think that's Helen who's recommended that. So marvellous. Thank you very much. So yes, thank you once again, Jackie. I will say goodbye a second time.
Thanks, Paul. Take care. Bye-bye. Bye.
So folks, if you have any further questions, as Jackie said, maybe just put them as a comment at the bottom of this feed or send me a message and one way or another, we can relay that to Jackie. She is a member of the Hive, so she will see it. And if she doesn't, I shall pass it on to her. So thank you for your presence. Thank you for your engagement. It's really good to get people talking and sharing their experience and asking questions. It makes the experience richer for me and hopefully for the guests as well. So I'm going to leave it there and enjoy the rest of your evening. Tomorrow is Friday, which means it is connection, support and meditation/visualization day. 8 p.m. if you want to join us on Zoom, and we'll just have a natter and say what's going on for us and whatever comes up, and maybe a lovely peaceful meditation to start the weekend. What better way could you do it when you can't go down the pub and have 8 pints of lager? Anyway, yes, thank you. All good. Thanks for being here. Hopefully see you tomorrow. If not, catch you soon. Bye-bye.